So I started this build off with making the subframe. Nice and simple, just screwed the thing together. So for anyone that doesn't know, a subframe is basically a place where the carcasses sit on top of, and the subframe is fixed to the floor and the carcasses are fixed to the subframe. So here I'm just making some simple L brackets, what I'm going to use to fix the subframe to the floor. So here you can see is using some packers. The floor was running down approximately 15 millimeters over the span of 1.3 meters. So I did actually fix into the skirting board and a little bit of glue onto some of those L brackets, and I fixed those into place with some screws as well. So you can see I removed some of the carpets, and this was solely because I do plan on getting some new carpet in the very near future. Otherwise I would have left the carpet where it was. I then turned my attention to making the carcasses. So I used the track saw with the parallel guides, and I basically cut all the components for all of the carcasses and all of the doors in one go. Once all that was done, I decided to make the first carcass up in my shed, and I've just screwed the thing together. There's no fancy fixings for this, although I do fully understand why people that do this for a living do actually use different sorts of systems. Obviously they've got to transport it to somebody else's house. They haven't got the luxury of building it in their own back garden type of thing, and then just walking it into the house like I did. Having said that, it was really heavy, and I did have to get my brother to give us a hand. So in the future, for somebody else, I think I would be using some sort of a fixing system. Here you can see is just adding a top shelf, and I did actually fix this into place with screws just to give it a bit more stability. Further shelves were added, but I just used shelf pins for that. Once I'd finished doing that, I just put some 6mm backing on and just pinned it into place. Obviously squared everything up. So this is something I opted to do. Not everybody does this, but I fixed some material to the wall, and basically I'm going to fix to that straight through the 6mm. Obviously the carcasses, they're getting fixed to the subframe as well, and obviously the subframe's fixed to the floor and the skirting board's absolutely solid. To be honest, it probably didn't need it, but obviously for peace of mind for me, I decided to fix it to the wall. I then made the upper carcass, and this was done in exactly the same way. I took the irises off just with some sandpaper, and I took it upstairs and made sure it fits. So the clothes hanger rail got delivered, and quite randomly I just decided to put it in just to get it up out of the way. Obviously I knew the carcasses weren't coming out again. Next up, I started making the faker shaker doors. So for anyone that doesn't know, it's exactly what it sounds like. These are fake shaker doors. So I used 18mm MDF for the main door itself. Then I used 6mm strips just to give the illusion of the styles and the rails for a real door. I finished up with my canna, a little bit of sandpaper, and then I marked out for the hinges. So I'm using regular European style hinges that are really common in the UK. I don't think there's as common in the US. So I've just marked out, and I used a simple jig I got from Amazon. Nothing special, but it does actually get the job done really well. So I'm happy I bought it, to be honest. Yeah, you can just see us using some wood filler just to fill all the holes that were left behind with the nail gun. So this dries really quick. I think somewhere in the region of maybe half an hour everything was dry and I was able to come back and sand it. Obviously this doesn't make too much of a difference because everything's been painted anyway. Once the doors were made, I brought them upstairs, just put them on just to kind of give it a bit of a feel. You can actually see the little white lights. I thought they were a nice touch. I got those from Amazon. I think they were about £20 for two. I'm quite happy I bought them. They're working out really well for us. So a little bit later on that night, I decided to paint the doors, just to try and get a bit more of a feel of, you know, what was happening with this build. So I've been very bold and I opted for a mint green. So it looks a lot lighter on camera than it is in real life. So it is actually a lot darker. I'm not overly sold on the colour, to be honest, but it's on at the moment, and I'm going to give it a little bit of time and see what grows on us. Yeah, I'm just scribing for the infill strip that goes between the carcass and the wall. I'm actually using the U-scribe jigs. I've never used these before. I've always just used a bit of wood and my pencil, but I have to admit they're really good. Next, I cut the strip out with my Ryoba saw because I'm not really a fan of jigsaws. I have got one, but I personally feel that I can get a better result with a Ryoba saw. So next up, I started making the crown moulding, or the cap moulding, whatever you want to call it. So again, this was just some construction lumber I had lying around, and I basically put a really simple moulding on it, and I cut it off with the track saw, and I glued some MDF onto the back of it. And basically the MDF was just so I could attach it to the top of the carcass. This was a bit fiddly, I have to admit. There's easier ways to do this, and the way I've done it, it wasn't one of the easier ways. I took the crown moulding upstairs and just marked up where I needed to cut the miters. I brought these back down into the shed and used my very high-tech miter saw. It wasn't very accurate, may I add, so I did actually have to finish this up with a block plane. I did glue this up using PVA glue, but I also used super glue on the MDF. The reason I used super glue on the MDF is that I could actually get it fixed into position really quickly when you spray it with the activator. Once I'd done that and everything was in place, I just put a couple of brads into it. So because I'm an idiot, I didn't actually cut this to length, which I should have done, so I had to improvise a little bit and cut it to length. It did actually work out okay, so I was lucky in this particular case. Yeah, I'm just using some scrap MDF that's got a drill hole in it, and this is basically just a very crude jig, just so I can get some shelf pins positioned. Very crude, very simple, but it does actually work. So I brought the top carcass back down onto the bed. I added the handles to the two doors. Obviously, I added the hinges, made sure everything was in line. And I also added the crown moulding as well. Obviously, the crown moulding is just going to be a lot easier to add down here. Obviously, I had everything marked up. I knew exactly where it was going, so this was quite easy. Everything worked out really well for it. It was, however, quite awkward to put back up there. It was a bit of a juggling act, but I did manage in the end. Once it was in a position, I just added a few screws just to tie all the carcasses together. Added the two top doors just to get them out of the way, and then I started adding the other components, the kick plate or the plinth, if you will, the end panel, the infill, so on and so forth. And then the last thing to go on is the doors. So here you can see is adding the end panel. I'd already prescribed this. I actually forgot to press record on the camera, so I didn't get myself scribing that. So I'm putting the screws in, and where I'm putting the screws is actually where the hinges are going to be, so you won't actually see these screws. It's always good practice to do things like this, so you can't see like a ton of screws where possible. Next up, it is the infill, and exactly the same again. I've positioned the screws where the hinges are going to fall, so you won't see the screws keeping the infill or the filler strip in position. And the last job was to adjust all the doors to make sure all the spacing was right and the doors were closing as they should. And that's it for this one, guys. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you think of the colour. As I said, I'm not completely sold on the colour, so I would appreciate some input. Thanks for watching, guys.